Okay, replacing the rear struts. This is a 2009 Toyota Venza. So first thing you're going to want to do, jack the vehicle up in the air. There's a nice jack point right under the rear in the center. And you want to open the trunk because you need to gain access to these strut towers in the back. Tools you're going to need for this job, you've got a breaker bar, impact, or a big, 1/2-inch ratchet. 22 and a 14 millimeter combo wrench. I recommend a ratcheting version of the 14. And you're going to need 10, 12, 14, 19, and 21 and 22 millimeter sockets. In addition to that, you're also going to want to use, I think this is a 4.5 millimeter hex key just to get the sway bar link off. Alright, so we're going to take the tires off. One more thing I want to mention is you do need a spring compressor of some sort. These springs don't hold a shit ton of tension, but I mean, working with springs is dangerous, removing them. So don't screw around, get something reliable. I went to Harbor Freight and I'll show you what I got here. But I got this guy here. Let me turn the light on for you. Yeah, it's pretty good. The first one came off, no problem. I'll show you the second one now. So, you gotta take the tires off. Easy. Alright. Okay, next thing you're going to do is you want to disconnect this sway bar end link from the strut assembly itself. I'm going to break it loose with just an impact gun. Now what's going to happen is once you break it loose, it's going to start spinning. So then what you want to do is grab your 14 millimeter wrench and your 4.5 millimeter hex. Hopefully that's the right size. This thing's all corroded, and then you're just going to give that a turn because it's going to just try to spin in place. So a little trick on this. The other one came off no problem. You're probably going to have a lot of this oil and dirt just attracted into the hole of the hex inside the stud. So what you want to do is you want to clear that out with some kind of pick or something, and then spray it out with PB Blast or WD-40 brake cleaner. I mean, whatever. You should probably PB Blast these bolts, but I'm lazy. Anyways, so while you got this on here, you want to kind of support this. After you clean it out, you want to support this with a couple fingers and then tap in the hex with, a little socket or a mallet, and that'll just make sure that it sits in there nice. It's not going to slip out and round out the hex, because I noticed these things are just, I don't know, they're kind of cheap. They round out very easily. Next, you want to zip off these bolts that attach the brake line. So one's a 12 and one's a 10. And just kind of pull these out of the way. And the next thing we're going to tackle is these two 22 millimeter bolts that hold the strut here to the actual spindle. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to grab your 22 millimeter wrench and put it on the bolt side, and then on the nut side take your ratchet or impact gun and zip that off. So as you can see, here we go. one. Running a little low on air, so that took a while. And here's two. Next thing you're going to want to do is just get these bolts out of here. You might need to tap them out with a hammer, but they should come right out. So just support the bottom of the spindle here and then push them out. So push up on the spindle and then pull out with the bolts. I'm sorry, I kind of got an injured hand here, so I'm working a little slow. Next thing you want to do is tackle these 14mm bolts on the top of the strut. And just to peel this cover off, flathead screwdriver, a little pry bar will do the trick. And that should do it, and the strut assembly should come right out. So now you just want to wiggle this back like that, and self-explanatory, it's going to come out. And now we need to compress the spring. So now we got to compress the strut. So I'm going to hook these up right on these two coils. A couple precautions you want is make sure there's the same distance or same amount of coils in between each of the hooks when you're compressing a strut, and make sure it's on there nice. It's not going to slip, anything like that. Use all the safety features that your compressor might have, and before you compress anything, you're going to want to mark up where the strut is, just to give you an idea where the spring and the strut kind of seat. So I'm going to do that. Now, on most, I'm going to do that right on the little seat there. It's a little rubber boot that the end of the strut seat's on. Now on these you don't actually have to worry. It's really self-explanatory where it all goes. I'll show you, but it's just a good precaution so you make sure everything lines up. Alright, so the safety pins are in, everything's lined up. Honestly, the hardest part with these is just making sure that it all fits in and everything's lined up. So now some of these setups you don't want to use an impact. I'm using actually a 1/4-inch drive impact and going very lightly, so just be safe and take pauses and go by feel and make sure nothing's slipping, recheck everything. So that's what I like about these. You only have to worry about one bolt to tighten, about 20-30 seconds. And you can see that the spring has already backed off the top of the strut mount. So you just want to back it off, maybe a tiny bit more than that, just enough so that you can undo this top bolt. It's important not to undo that top bolt before you get to this step, because it's just going to be a mess getting it back together again. I'm not saying you can't, I just don't think it's very safe. Typically we do this in a vise, but this is just how I'm going at it. Now we're going to attack that top strut mount bolt so we can get the strut out of here. We're keeping this coil compressed, and we're going to slide a new strut in and assemble the whole thing. Out she goes. And now what you'll be able to do is you can just pull this strut through. So you want to inspect this seat boot here, where the bottom of the coil spring seats itself. You want to inspect it for any tears, something like this. I mean, should you replace it? Sure, but in a perfect world, this is going to do just fine to prevent that metal-on-metal contact as long as everything is put back together right. So I'm going to reuse this. And up here, you want to inspect this kind of bushing material, make sure there's no cracks or extreme dry rot. And then you're actually going to have this in here, which slides onto the strut itself and dampens it. So this strut's done. Doesn't even hold itself up. Push it in, doesn't come back up. The seals on that are just letting oil leak right through. It's just not. It's not doing its job anymore. So now we got the new strut. I actually did put it in a vise. My vise isn't bolted in. Just want to push it down a few times. See how it's working. Get it broken in just a little bit before you put it in the car. There you go. And normally these things aren't going to have that much travel unless they bottom out, but so this is good. This is the OE part. I don't know why they used Kib, but these will work nice. And it's super stiff right now. Now we got to seat this little boot on here so you can see where the edge of that bottom spring goes. So you want to line the boot up with that. Just like so. See how it goes into that little indent there? And that raised lip, so that's where the end of the spring is going to go. So you want to try to line that spring up with that. You want to slide on this, so this makes your ride a little softer if you're bottoming out the car. So slide that on, skinny end goes on the top, that's what it looks like. And then we're going to toss the coil on. So the bottom of the spring lines up with that with that indent we were talking about before. You slide on the boot with the top mount. There's a D-shaped stud on the top. You want to line that up with the top mount. There's also a D-shaped hole. And then you're going to turn it around to line up with, I'm just going to pull it off so you can see, this end mark here. And that's where the top of the spring is going to line up. So you want the end of the top of the spring to go right in that indent. So you're going to have to line the D shape up and turn it how you see fit. So you're going to put that, once you get the top of the coil spring lined up as well as the bottom, you're going to put that round sleeve on top and then follow that up with the strut bolt. And you're going to tighten this a little bit, make sure it's lined up, and then just continue to tighten it a little bit more, and you can finally torque it down when it's all installed on the car. So now you're going to slowly loosen your spring compressor, making sure that each end of the coil is lined up with those indentations that we mentioned before, down here and up top. And you just want to, slowly back it out. If you got the double action spring compressors, you want to do each side evenly. So, one turn here, one turn there, that kind of thing. And then just check to see how you're lined up. And as you can see, the top of that spring is seated perfectly with that indentation on the bushing. Alright, so now we're just going to reverse the removal steps and install the new strut. So what you need to do is install these bolts on the rear side of the vehicle and then have the nuts attached to the front side of the vehicle. Once you get that in, little trick, use your jack and just jack up this whole spindle, hub, whatever. Get it lined up with those holes in there and just start jacking it through the top, because you're not going to be able to hold this strut assembly in place while trying to line up the studs that are coming out of the top to get them through the holes and secure the nuts on top of them. Okay, I also used the jack once I got the first stud in for the bottom strut bolts. I use the second jack to line up the strut to the next hole to just push that bolt through, because it's kind of a pain in the ass. You don't need to do it, but you know, why work harder when you can work smarter? So same thing, just throw that 22mm wrench right on there, grab your ratchet or impact, and tighten up those 22mm nuts on the other side. Now, I apologize, folks, I don't have the torque specs handy on here. I'm just going to go tight. I'm assuming it's probably around 100 foot-pounds, maybe a little more. So I'm just going to go ahead and recheck those when I'm all done. So we're going to leave that sway bar end link until we get it all bolted up on top. It's just going to line up a little bit easier once everything's put together. So you can start bolting up the brake lines back to the strut. So again, that's a 12. And a 10. And we're going to take the jack. I'm going to start jacking up that strut right up into those holes. So you're going to have to give it a little forward push, line it up with those holes up there. And then once you get it in and jack it through, just bolt up the top 14mm bolts. Okay, so now you want to throw those 14mm nuts on and just tighten up the bolts there. And next you want to just take the top strut nut. It's a 19mm. I'm sorry, my camera's dying. And tighten that up as well. And you're good to go. And you don't want to get this thing super tight. You know, you're twisting it in the strut mount bushing there. But tight enough. Alright, so 3 14mm and 1 19. So same thing as before. 4.5mm Allen wrench and your 14mm combo wrench. I recommend a ratcheting one. Also, I put a little bit of anti-seize on those threads there because this is the only thing that really gave me any sort of trouble. So just making that easy to install and remove in the future. So you're just going to tighten this guy up here. And then you're all done. Throw the wheel back on, release the jack, and you're good to go. I apologize, my battery's dying on my camera here, or rather my phone. So light is not too good. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. Good luck.